content for energy risk. And I'm joined today by Mette Nørr Gantzhorn, who's Head of Global Inclusion and Wellbeing at renewable energy firm Ørsted. Diana Leng, who's the former Chief Financial Officer at KS Drilling. And Ken Han, who's the CEO of commodities software firm Enuit. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stella.
So it's a great time to be discussing leadership in energy and commodities at the moment, I think, due to the enormous change that's facing the industry ahead. And as the world moves to the low carbon economy, obviously the energy industry is at the heart of that transition. And the way in which an energy company positions itself now, what it does over the next few years, is really going to dictate its role in the future, and perhaps indeed whether it has a role in the future. So this requires a lot from leaders. It's not about maintaining the status quo with incremental changes. It's really about new ways of thinking, being able to set the company on a new path and create the buy-in that you need around that new vision. So we're hoping that you, the audience, are going to be engaged with this session, and we do welcome your questions. Please type them into the Q&A box at any time, and it's a great opportunity to ask these three leadership experts your burning questions on leadership. So with that, let me put the first question, if I may please, to Mette. And bearing in mind what I've just said about the energy industry being, facing enormous change going ahead, what do you believe are the essential qualities that are needed now by a leader in the energy and commodities space?
Oh, thank you, Stella. It's good to be here. Well, I would say it is an enormously interesting time to also be discussing leadership qualities at the moment. And you could say that one of the most predictable things that we know right now is that the world is unpredictable. And I think if anything, the last year has taught us that we cannot foresee, not in the energy business, not in a lot of businesses, what the future will bring. And I think that really puts the emphasis on the leadership role as well. And what we do see is that the sort of the virtues or the qualities that we were looking for in leaders, let's say just 5 years ago, have dramatically changed in these past few years. And you could say that what was needed then is not what's going to take us into the future. We do need leaders who are ready to be redirective, resetting strategies, or simply be very open-minded about circumstances and where that takes us. And you could also say that the 10-year strategies that we used to see a lot of in leadership companies or leadership teams really has proven to be not worth the time and effort. And what you instead see is that you would need a very short time horizon and really just be ready for the unforeseen, because we do need, and we know that the unforeseen is a certainty, right? So I think that is what most successful leaders today will realize, that they need to be open-minded, they need to be curious, and they need to be ready really to adapt to the changing reality. Those are the successful ones we see today.
Yes, and at Ørsted, when you talk about leadership and you look at the qualities you need, are you talking only really about your senior leadership, or do you look for that quality in all your roles throughout, just heads of department, people that have teams that may not be up at board level, but certainly could influence thinking?
We do. We have what we call our ETRM qualities. We have some ETRM characteristics, 9 characteristics that we do expect all leaders and all employees to realize the importance of. And it's about being original, it's about being curious, it's about being open-minded, it's about being caring. And you could say a lot of the words that we didn't used to hear 5-10 years ago, but has proven to be very important, not just to achieve our hard targets, but also to bring the culture there, to the company there. And we know for a fact that that is what great leadership looks like at all levels, but also the leadership that you can demonstrate and show as an employee without the formal leadership role. So those are the qualities that we're looking for in all of us, and also discussing and exploring in each other's behavior.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll come back in a bit more detail later to the idea of the leadership changing over time, of what you know, what the essential qualities might have looked like or might have been needed a few years ago are perhaps different now. I'd like to turn to you, Diana, if I can next, please. And I'm interested in what you think on some of the issues that Mette said. Do you, when you sort of consider what is needed in a leader, do you think there are some qualities that are innate, that someone has to have, that's something special, or do you think everything can be learned?
I don't know that it is innate per se. I do think that with practice comes perfection. But when it comes to leadership, I think that if you're not genuinely interested, if you don't like being around people, or you don't enjoy finding out what drives people, you know, the task of leadership itself can become quite an uphill task and maybe a bit of a counterproductive toll demand. So I think you have to naturally have an interest in, you know, what drives people, what moves them forward, what motivates them, you know, how to invoke passion in people, and have a bit of that yourself. So these are probably things that are not so easily learned, but I do think that there's a lot of skills that over time you can hone and you can practice and you can, you know, learn from others and even your teams around you.
Yes, thank you. And Ken, could I bring you in now? You obviously see across an entire, you know, you see a lot of firms across the commodities scope. Would you say there's anything specific to commodities or to energy as well that needs specific qualities, you know, that would be different from other leadership roles?
Yes. I do see that in this world, actually in the energy trading world, it's a global business. I think each company in each region is different. At Inuit, you know, we have offices in all this market where our clients are, and each region, they have their own culture and their own way of doing business. So our strategy is to have local people to do the sales and marketing and then services, other than centralized development. What I learned was there were two things that I learned was that you know, as leaders, you don't have to be the smartest people that in the company or in the project. Second is, why do you want to hire people that are smart, but you don't, you know, always want to tell them what to do? So we need to give them authority and then to give them support and to give them trust. And I think, you know, there's many qualities that are good leadership qualities. But I think one thing that is the most important is to be able to trust, to be able to trust other people, to be able to let other people trust you. So trust is the key, not only for your employees, but also with your clients. I remember when I first met Mr. Tanaka. He is the CEO of there's a trading company called Mitsui Singapore Trading. So they were about to implement our in-trade system. He took me into his office and told me that he had only one request because he knew that it was not easy to implement our CTRM system. He said, if there's any problem, I want to hear from you and we will solve it together. No product is perfect and no project is perfect. No person is perfect, but trusted partnership and relationship are the essence to every success. So if there's one thing that I have to mention, is trust.
Yes, that's interesting. And it seems to be that ability to be humble, actually, that can be, you know, an essential quality of a lot of really good leaders. I wondered if you could just, for a few moments, each tell us a little bit about your personal experience of leadership. You know, what are the, if I could start with Diana, actually, please. did you set out to be, were you very ambitious? Did you set out to be, you know, one of the top people in your company? And, you know, what are some of the biggest challenges you encountered on the way?
Thank you, Stella. I think, yes, I am an ambitious person. I think I always had a lot of things I wanted to do, but I wouldn't say I set out to become a leader per se. I think one day you kind of, you know, go about doing your thing and you realize you have a following. And I think my luck, my genuine luck was that, you know, I've been surrounded with, by great people, good leaders. So they inspire you to take on their, you know, positive behavior, and great teams that motivate you to enable them. I'm a person who set out to do my tasks. So when I started out, like I said, I had a lot of things I wanted to do, and I guess the deliverables can only be achieved if, you know, the whole organization moves with you. So over time, you learn that, you know, leadership surprisingly takes on a bigger and bigger role in your day-to-day activity, and it's a huge enabler. Having said that, I think that, you know, of course, today no conversation goes by without touching upon COVID-19. I think this particular period has pointed out that leadership now more than ever, and I think Mette, you know, touched upon that a little bit as well. Leadership now more than ever, you know, touches on different requirements and different skills, and it's for the first time that I realized that, you know, being at the top of that value chain sometimes also means that can be the loneliest job ever. Whereas people always kind of think that, you know, this is being a leader, it means that you're constantly surrounded by people, constantly having to take decisions, constantly trying to, you know, resolve issues. But, you know, what if all you're trying to resolve is a very loud silence? So that's something that I think was, you know, was quite astonishing for me to learn during this period. And, you know, I don't know how that resonates with my co-panelists and the audience, but it's something that's not often spoken about.
Yes, yeah, interesting. Thank you. Well, Mette, perhaps we could put that to you. How has it been for you trying to coordinate things during this working from home period?
Right. Well, it's been interesting. To me, I think it's on a personal note, especially because I have spent the last year before we went into lockdown, agitating for a more flexible working conditions in my former company. So it turned out to be one of those situations where be careful what you wish for, because you might get it. And of course, it's important to say that what we have been experiencing and what we are still experiencing is certainly not flexible working conditions at all. On the contrary, this has been the most inflexible period of all, I think. We've all been tied to our desks. We've had, you know, spouses, we've had partners, we've had children and, you know, pets, etc., all interfering, bad Wi-Fi connections. I mean, I'm sure that we can all speak on really painful experiences about this. But one of the things I think has actually created some unforeseen positive effects also are two things. One thing is, I think great leadership has more than ever proven to be important in really getting us through this period. So not just realizing what the hardcore targets and achievements that we have been able to accomplish during this period, but also really saluting and holding our leaders accountable for how they have cared for their people during this period. Because obviously, it's not the same. You know, our conditions are not the same. We hear a lot about anxieties, about loneliness, about fear of loved ones, etc. So I think from a leadership perspective, your portfolio of qualities have widened in what you need to be able to care for. And with that said, we also see that working in a global company, we have seen people feeling more included. So for instance, imagine if you're the only person dialing in from, let's say, the Asia Pacific region to a meeting taking place in Copenhagen, where most of our workforce is. You would often feel that you were the one being forgotten up in the corner screen of a big, huge meeting room, and you're not participating in the coffee chat, in the breaks, etc. So I think for some of our colleagues, this has proven to be an ability to really create some more equality and more inclusive meetings.
Yeah.
So unforeseen.
Yes.
And something we can build on definitely as we hopefully will transition into a new working period soon.
Yes, thank you. And can I just ask you as well, going back to the earlier question about your personal journey, as it were, into your role, very senior within your company, a very important one. You came from outside the industry, so it'd be good to get a perspective on how you feel the energy industry compares.
That's interesting. I am 3 months into my role, so it is still early days. And of course, from a lot of perspectives, I think this is one of the most important industries that you could find yourself in. Obviously, we are also very proud of being ranked the world's most sustainable company at Ørsted, which is, of course, also why a lot of people join us and feel that the purpose is so important. And I think that's something that you can truly sense in the energy business, especially renewable energy, is the pride that people take in the work that they're doing. We're not just doing work for the here and now, we're doing work for the future. We're also trying to set a less, you could say, heavy footprint for the next generations to come. And that purpose is something that is visibly seen in how people act and how people behave in our company and the decisions that they make. So I think it both attracts a lot of people, but it also an ability to do good that has proven to be extremely important. And I'm also coming from a former company that was a triple bottom line and a very, I could say, humanistic company. But it's certainly the common denominator between the two, and something that the energy business has a huge opportunity to prove themselves in the future.
Yeah, thank you. So, Ken, could you elucidate us a little bit on your journey to become the CEO? Again, was it something you set out to do from a young age? Did you imagine that you'd be running a company? And what's been the major challenge for you?
Oh yeah, so I actually had never imagined that I would be a CEO of this company. My business partner and I started this company more than 12 years ago. My background was more from development and technical background, but over the years, the company grow. So inevitably, you have to just take a leadership role. So for me, it is a learning process along the way. And I've tried to read books. I've read many books about management and leadership, but not many books really tells you how to, some of the books tells you how to really manage your company, but really not many books talks about leadership. So it's really learning from people around you, people from your client, and so forth. So fortunately enough for me that I am surrounded by a lot of people who have a lot of experience from different areas. So so I was able to learn from them, and fortunate enough that I have a business partner that he is willing to allow me to try, and sometimes I make mistakes, but at the same time, he keep giving me this opportunity to grow.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I want to bring in now the concept about the qualities of a leader changing over time, and what may have been perhaps the best leadership style a few years ago may not be now. How does the leader make sure that they stay relevant, that they're not churning out the skills that they learnt, the style that they learnt from their boss 10 years ago, which may not be the right thing, not just because of what's going on in the company, but because of the new generation of people coming through now. Do millennials respond in the same way to things that people did you know, 10, 20 years ago. Diana, could I ask your thoughts on that, please?
Yes, sure. It was mentioned earlier as well. I think humility is a very big one of this. You stay relevant by never assuming that you've known it all, seen it all. You come into every situation, you know, taking a perspective that someone in the room has someone to share, something to share that will shed a different type of light on the situation than all you may possibly already bring, or all that you think that you are going to bring to the table. You know, of course, you come in as a, you know, senior or someone in a leadership position to bring value. But I think a lot of value comes from listening and unlearning and helping others unlearn perspectives. So I think one of the key elements here, just to answer that question very simply and to the point, is, you know, to always continue to be a lifelong learner, and that it means a whole lot more than just the words. It means that, you know, you have to be able to put yourself in a vulnerable position where you say, okay, you know, this is not my area, this is not my field, and I may have been in this situation before, but not everything I know about this may apply here, and hear what the people around you and around them again have to say about it. So I think the willingness to continue to want to learn is very, very important.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Mette, can I bring you in here? It was interesting, the phrase that Diana used to unlearn something. From your point of view, when you're perhaps, I don't know, brainstorming what the ideal qualities might be in a leader, when you're hiring, perhaps that's one thing because you can set that agenda. What about existing people in the company who, you know, may not naturally be displaying all of those skills? How do you go about that?
Well, I completely agree with Diana about the unlearning of things, and going back to the first question about what qualities are we seeing that need to change. And you could say that I, you know, as a psychologist in my educational background, I do believe that people don't fundamentally change. They don't change their behaviors, but they can change their behaviors. They don't change their personalities, but they can change their behaviors. And the funny thing about this is that when we see that people who have grown up in an organization, they have been valued, they were hired, they were promoted, they were recruited by having a certain set of qualities. You know, they were perhaps compliant, they were risk averse, they were extremely cautious in their decision making, very thorough, perfectionistic maybe even, because those were the qualities that the organization needed at a given point. So now, with the new wind blowing and new requirements, we are asking people to really demonstrate a behavior that profoundly perhaps is not in their personality makeup. So how can you transition from being, you know, extremely proud of being perfect and being thorough and conscientious into being risk-taking and bold and making, you know, bold decisions? And leaders have come to me and asked me, so are you trying to replace me, or are you trying to change me? What, you know, this is doing something to me. And I think that friction and that element is something that needs a lot more attention as we proceed, because this is about how do you develop in the context, because the context has changed as well. So this is about change management in essence, that I think is so important to focus on, and the unlearning also requires that you yourself, as Diana said, is curious and want to know what you don't know, but it also, there is an element that there seems to be a natural law or a law of nature that the higher in the hierarchy you become, the less feedback you receive, the less, you know, you need to surround yourself with fearless people who dare give you the feedback that you need, and also address the blind spots that you of course have as any leader, but you don't see. So how do you do that? How do you, like Ken said, how do you create that trust where you trust people to give you the feedback, but the people need to also trust you as a leader that you're able to receive it and will not yeah, there will not be unforeseen consequences of it, because sometimes it's not very well received either.
Yes, and interesting you say that sometimes leaders come to you with a feeling of uncomfortableness and almost wondering if there's an agenda to replace them. Actually, I guess that's quite a good thing that they've recognised that. If they're not feeling uncomfortable, and it might mean they're just carrying on in a very bombastic way, even unaware of some of these things that are happening around them. So yeah, that's really interesting. Could I stick with you now and ask you a little bit more about diversity and inclusion, because that's very much part of your job role, isn't it? What are the benefits? Would you sum them up for energy firms in trying to be diverse and inclusive in their workforce?
Well, first and lastly, diversity is good business. I mean, that is an unquestionable fact of organizational life. It is good business to have diversity in your organization, but it doesn't come easily. It requires a long focused effort within creating inclusion. So we know for a fact that if you have or are able to grow an organization that is a place where everyone, no matter who they are, can thrive, can perform, can grow as people, as professionals, then diversity actually is you could say a byproduct of that, because that increases your talent pool. And you could argue, especially in the business that we are in, that we simply see that our growth ambitions and the amount and the diversity of talent that we need, we cannot attract that unless we expand the pool that we are attracting from. So we need to have that open-mindedness and saying, how do we ensure that we have and we can provide conditions that will attract all sorts of people, because that will drive more innovation, that will make our decisions better, that will create a culture that's vibrant and diverse and really is a place where things can grow and multi-perspectives can thrive. So, we know for a fact that the companies who do have diversity at all levels of their organizations simply are making better business. So, I mean, that's my tagline. That's my A, B, and C. That's what we need. But it all starts with inclusion and the psychological safety. Ken was mentioning trust before. You need to create an organization of psychological safety if you want to bring the best out in the people that you have. Otherwise, you are limiting yourself. You are hearing what you want to hear. You're not being given the feedback or the input or the innovation that you need, and we're simply not going to grow that way.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Okay, thank you. Diana, can I bring you in here?
Yes.
As we hear Mette's ideas and that is all a very worthy ideal, and she makes a very good case that it's good business sense to move ahead like that. What's your experience of where the industry is at with that at the moment?
I think Mette makes a very compelling and excellent case. And in fact, I hope everybody has heard her continue to listen to her A, B, and C. I love it. Let me start by saying that I think in the recent times, I personally have seen a great number of fantastic initiatives and progress when it comes to inclusion and diversity. Let's start with that, in energy at least, yeah? That comes with the realization that, sustainability is driven by innovation and inclusion and diversity. Taking a small step backwards, I would safely say that I have also, unfortunately, seen the good, the bad, and the ugly as well. It is really not so very simple. And let me start with myself. I think that we all are naturally more comfortable and more easygoing with people who are like-minded and like ourselves, and we are most natural with those that are like us. So that's already immediately the opposite of diversity. if you want to bring the gender discussion in, I think in energy, that's in oil and gas energy, and definitely in my former sector, it's a tough one. There's not so many of us there. Having said that, I've been very fortunate to work with teams who have always been very inclusive and almost to a protective level. So I think a lot of it is what you do with that unique situation at that point in time. So if you believe, and your stance is, the diversity is important for us because it brings resilience and it accelerates change of perspective. And since you can't know everything and do everything yourself, wanting to learn also means that you surround yourself with people and ideas and thoughts that will be different. And the only way to almost really guarantee that is to populate that group with deliberately with people who will bring different ideas. So I think this is the subject I can continue to talk about over a glass of wine for a very, very long time. I'm very, very optimistic that in energy we will see great progress, simply because we're forced to. And the understanding is also really maturing. I can see it all around. But it starts with small steps with yourself. So I think the important thing here is how to ask yourself as a leader, what do I do for what do I bring when I want to build and increase diversity in just simply in my teams, in my working style, in my thinking, the areas that I can directly affect. And you'd be surprised actually to find how little maybe you are actively still doing, but in the mind it's pretty much there. So how do you move the heart and the mind at the same time will be a useful one to keep coming back to when thinking about diversity.
Yes. And Ken, can I bring you in here for your perspective across the commodities space? What are you seeing in terms of diversity trends? Have you noticed a definite trend towards companies being more inclusive in recent years, and especially in Asia, in Asia and Europe? Is there differences?
Oh, absolutely. We, as a company, like I mentioned, that we have offices in different countries and different regions, and then they all have their own culture and their own backgrounds. I think being able to recognize the difference, among all these different race and different people, it's very important. Be able to respect them is very important. Diane just mentioned that people are more comfortable, like including myself, and feel more comfortable to be surrounded by people just like yourself, right? Saying the same language, eating the same kind of food, and together you can talk about, the same things. But at the same time, if everything is the same, you don't learn new things. You just don't. So you have to be able to create this culture of diversity, and then be able to have people be able to understand other culture and understand other people and be able to learn from them. Because we have, earlier Mette actually mentioned there's only thing that does not change is everything keep changing. That's not the exact word that she said, but that's just the truth. For our business, because we're a software provider, imagine if there's no change and there's people just don't need the software. Because our software actually grow is because there are changes in policies, there are changes in how new commodities being traded, there are changes in new ways of trading the commodities. So we have to be able to adapt, all the changes, because we're constantly going to new regions. I found out that every new region that we went to, they actually bring out, some difference, some new requirements that needs to be added to the software. Sometimes you feel like, wow, that's difficult because this is the way that my software does things, right? I go to your company, now you want to do it this way. I just cannot do it. But, you listen and then you try to actually find a way to actually make it work for them. At the end, your software and your team actually improves. So sometimes, just difficulties or differences or diversities always bring out good things as long as you can be resilient and to learn from it.
Yes, yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And, I think we can say from the three of you that you're all agreed that diversity is a good thing. But where do we go from that in terms of hiring? I wonder, Mette, if I could ask you that sort of controversial word, I guess sometimes, positive discrimination, is that what's required?
Oh, it's a good question, and my preferred answer would be no. I don't believe in quotas. I don't believe in positive discrimination. But on the other hand, we can also see in many companies that if we don't change the way we do things, we might look at 50 years of the same, trying to influence or trying to change the numbers of our diversity portfolio. So something, of course, also needs to happen. We have seen absolutely no progress in most global companies with the past 8 years. And in some areas, the numbers have decreased. So we're not doing very well, I have to say, on a global scale. But what I think is another way of going about this is what I call dilution. So for instance, when you're recruiting, when you are innovating, when you're making decisions, etc., you need to ensure that you have a representation of diversity around those decision-making tables, because you can bring as many diverse shortlists into a recruitment process. But if the people who are selecting the candidate or the final candidate are the same and have not changed, then you're probably going to get the same decision, right?
Yes, yeah.
So either adding more perspectives or adding different kinds of perspectives, and thereby I like the word diluting, because then you will still have that voice heard, but then you will have a lot of voices heard, and that can actually drive different decisions.
Yeah.
And then of course doing all sorts of other things with behavioral science and nudging and design your process in a way to promote some more diverse decision making. You can do all sorts of things instead than the quotas.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I believe the quotas would simply drive the wrong behavior and stigmatizing the diverse candidates. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We've only got a couple more minutes left, but we have had a couple of questions come in at the last minute. So we've been told that we can go a couple of minutes over time in order to answer these. So let me have a look at the first one. So someone's asked, what's the best approach to motivating teams? Obviously a very wide question there, but perhaps Diana, could you give that your best shot first of all, please?
I touched on it a little bit earlier. I think it's a passion. It's driving the passion, understanding what drives your teams, so what moves them, and focusing that intelligently, helping to focus, to prioritize all of that emotion that you can bring about in a team. If it's intrinsic, it's better.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then the next question, and perhaps put this to both Mette and Ken, and it's on decision making. It says making difficult decisions is never easy. Is there any way to make it easier? So I guess that's talking about the actual process of decision making when it's really difficult and perhaps it's going to affect people. Do you have a recommended route, as it were, a process you follow with difficult decisions? I'll put that to Mette first.
Well, of course, nobody likes making difficult decisions that will impact other people in a bad way. Usually, there's a good reason why you need to make them. And I think realizing and just going beyond the here and now, hurting somebody, maybe a big layoff round could be the case. Then there is still, I think, some assurance in make sure that you do it in a proper way, in a respectful way. There's a tendency that when a decision becomes too difficult, you will hit and run and really not make sure that you are also doing it in a respectful way. And then, make sure that you have people around you to talk to and to discuss the ins and outs with would be my encouragement, because we all know that they're there and they need to be taken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with people so it doesn't just all fall on you. Yeah. Ken, what do you think? You must have had occasions when you've had to make very difficult business decisions.
Oh yes, absolutely. Very often. But I think there are ways to make it easier. To make it easier is to be able to set priorities. And then 1, 2, 3, which one is the most important for you? And it's going to be very hard to make things perfect. It's going to be very hard to gain everything. You have to know that there are certain things probably are better for other people, but may not be better for you or your company or your team. So you have to learn how to give up on certain things. And then also there are principles that you have to abide with. So sometimes you just feel like, no, that's not the way that you're supposed to do things, and you just need to change that. So yes, there are easy ways. So again, setting the priorities, making sure you always abide your own principles.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And Diana, can we just bring you in here to have the last word perhaps on that question? When there's a lot at stake, what do you do? How do you go about taking these difficult decisions?
I keep 2 North Stars, ironically. One has to do with noise, cancel out all of the noise. In every difficult decision, there's always a lot of noise. And because you can't really see the forest through the trees anymore, as we say in Dutch, it makes it all the harder. So when faced with a difficult decision, try to figure out what is the noise and what's the bottom line. And my second North Star is things that you can control versus the things you do not control. Don't make decisions about things that you absolutely have no impact over, that you cannot directly control. So when you come to your decision, I try to focus on the things that actually really are within the zone of control. I know it sounds a little bit easier than the reality, but actually I find that when I map it out and I put it in a box, these 2 things, if I do that systematically, it kind of takes away the pain of it takes away the difficult in the difficult decision. Sometimes it's still painful, but
yeah. Okay, thank you. Well, that's great tips there from all of you. Thanks very much. So we have reached the end of our time now. So I'd just like to thank our panelists very much for giving up your time and giving us your expertise today on leadership. Very much appreciated. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who is watching and listening.
Thank you, Stella.
Thank you, Stella.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.